Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Histerosophy with my beautiful friend, Professor Zane. And we are going to talk today about conspiracy theories. So there's a lot of them out there, and they're fun to talk about, fun to speculate on. There are people that make a cottage industry living on these things, and they kind of just write books about them, sell them, and present them to the public as if they're truth. Today, we're going to kind of dive in a little bit and see what we think maybe have a grain of truth to it, or if it's all just butkus. Mr. Zane, how are you doing, my friend? Good to see you again.
I'm doing fine.
I'm
just
glad
buying cat food.
Cat food's important, man. Cats need it to live.
Yeah, and humans need to live.
So earlier this week, Ben, you introduced me to a person named Jay Dyer. What can you tell me about him?
He is this guy who I started listening to him a few years ago. I don't know, I think he's trying to be a comedian, actor. He's really not that funny. He still does some comedy stuff, but he's really not that funny. And he was, in Los Angeles, and then he started becoming obsessed with, like 20 years ago, it sounds like, conspiracy stuff. And he was always kind of going, okay, we start off Baptist, then he went Calvinist, and then I went Anglican. Then he went Roman Catholic. And then I skipped that and went straight to Orthodox. And then he became Orthodox. And now he's like the Ortho Bros online. He is like the
Ortho
God.
Bros.
He is the master debater for Ortho Bros. So he has tons of young guys that follow him and want to argue with him.
Master debater.
But he's master Ortho Bro debater.
So lately, I watched a video of his, and we have a small clip of that one today. But he was talking about just the conspiracy theories that I've kind of heard of since the 80s, really. Actually, they probably started writing on them in the 60s in a few books I read from the 60s. But all of these have been around for a long time. I mean, do you give any stock or do you give any thought to like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission or these groups that they keep bringing up over and over again?
Well, I don't know as much about it as you do. I was somewhat interested in it. Really, once I hit my adult years, I was totally into theory and postmodernism. So that went so far beyond conspiracy theory. This is like we're living in an infinite regressive simulations, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess it could, but since all of this is a simulation anyway, I mean, I guess anything could be true.
Exactly.
and I've only, since I've gotten older, become interested in history. I was never interested in history. I was always philosophy, some poetry. So since I've gotten older now, I'm very interested in history. So I read a lot of history, and that's usually where conspiracy stuff comes up, when it has to do with history.
Well, the history to me, like history and philosophy go hand in hand. Like I feel like you can't have one without the other.
Well, the history of ideas, that's what I know. So if you ask me, Lucian's idea in Rome, or what were the pre-Socratics thinking, or in Plato's dialogue, and so I know about the ideas, but if you ask me, when did Rome start? I'd be like, I don't know. Or you'd say, what are the Middle Ages? Or if you ask me, like, can you name one battle in the American Revolution? I would say no, but I can discuss the importance of it, in relation to the French Revolution. So it's just, I only knew about ideas. I didn't have any facts.
Yeah, I mean, but the ideas,
I didn't care about it.
What's the important part? I mean, the ideas are what tend to be cyclical. Like we're going through the same ideas that they were going through in the Bolshevik Revolution now. So that was 1917. And now it's coming back again to where the same concepts in the Weimar Republic again, it kind of cycled through in Germany, 1930s.
I can see that.
It's just all coming, like it's the same thing over and over again. But those are history of ideas.
Yeah, it's cyclical. I told my students, I remember like 30 years ago, I said, within a few decades, nothing will exist except for viruses and corporations.
Yeah.
Just no. In other words, the viruses will be running the corporations.
Yeah, that's
no humans.
It's
Just-
very true.
just viral forms of life running what we think of now as corporations. They're no longer based
there
on
is a
money.
one of the mother of all conspiracy theories is called the dead internet theory. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, there's nobody
I've
on the
heard that.
internet. Yeah, there's only a few thousand people on the internet, and the rest is just generated by computers. It's all fake. And I was like, that's
Well,
interesting.
I showed you this. I showed you the stupid thing on Facebook that came up today. I posted that you
Mhm.
don't have to generate your own content anymore. I said now we have automatic content, so that I can just go up there and just click on something, and it will generate a meme or some statement because they have everything going back to 2008, 9
Yeah.
on Facebook, so they
Yeah.
can just post something based on my profile. So I don't even
Yeah.
have to post on Facebook. But what's the point? If
Yeah.
it's like now with AI being so good at generating images and memes, you have AI generating memes, but you have AI bots that are responding to the memes. So in other words, it's just AI responding to AI.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
That's
like
very
I
true.
told you before in classes that I teach. If the students, I'm teaching to do this, if the students are using ChatGPT and other things to create text and audio, and then I'm using it to create responses. You really just have technology responding to technology.
Yeah.
You don't need the humans. The humans don't need to learn anything. The fact that I was training AI. In fact, this is what I was when I tried to get into grad school or another grad school years ago. I said, I'm really interested in the phenomenological relationship between the subject and the object in online education. So what I said was, the point is not to interact with students or teachers. The point of being online is to teach the system itself. And the point of the students being online is to teach the system how to learn. It doesn't really matter if there are humans involved. And this was like 15 years ago. So of course everybody thinks,
So do you think
I was
that
trying to
do
get
you think there would ever be like a point to where AI can no longer learn anything from humans? In other words, we've generated all the things we could possibly generate, images, whatever. What happens when that stops? Because that's what AI is going to be self-destroying. In other words,
it's cannibalizing itself now. That's become a problem.
yeah,
I've heard of at a certain point, we're not generating the content. We're using it to generate content. So it's
right.
generating content for itself. So it's just kind of it's like cows eating cows. At a certain point, disease, isn't there some disease that you can get from, like, if you eat
There's mad cow
people that
disease.
disease, cannibalism disease?
Yeah.
If humans eat each other, they get mad cow disease.
Well, I don't know if there. I mean, maybe I don't know if there's been enough human eating in the life to study that, but
No, that's kind of becoming in fashion. Have you noticed?
what, eating people?
Cannibalism, yeah.
Yeah, I know Joe
The
Biden's
idea of
father
it.
apparently.
No, a lot of people like to write about it now. It's become one of those
Joe
awful
Biden.
kink things. All those queer kink things. They like to write about cannibalism. Like,
Yeah,
I guess there's no limit. There's no limit to what depravity they will sink, whoever they is.
Well, it's got to go somewhere. In other words, they have the depravity and the decadence has to. Its logical progression is to go to infinity. So it's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah,
and
we're
worse and worse.
already at the level of child. You know what?
Yeah.
So we may as well
and
sink lower into
cannibalism.
cannibalism.
And then why do you go after that?
Why not? Well, I mean, I guess you could go to big public spectacles of human sacrifice, like humans did for a long time.
That's definitely where it's going, man. That's definitely where it's going.
I used to think, when you look back at those videos in the South where people went to go to see lynchings, I used to think, what kind of people would go to something like that? You think,
why would they want to watch that at all?
Look, yeah, like right now, if I saw a dog get hit by a car, I would freak out. I wouldn't be like, let me go over there and just watch it slowly die. So it makes you think. But the fact that people do that, I'm thinking, actually, if we were had mass human sacrifice, I think a lot of people would go watch it for fun.
That's what I remember
I'm not
watching.
saying I would.
The Running Man and the Running Man.
Yeah, the Running
movie.
Man.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is
Yeah.
exactly where society's going, man. We're going to be watching public executions as a game show. I'm like, well, yeah, that seems
Well,
pretty.
that's because we're getting rid of Christian values. It's because we're getting rid of Christian values. It'll fit right in with Islamic values. Since they love public beheadings, sort of, and stoning, so it'll fit right in. Christian values. Now, it was part of the Catholic Church, though. Lots, and I can't just blame the Catholic Church. There's been a lot of bloody wars and rebellions. So it'd be fair for me to say, oh, look at Christianity now. Everybody's so sweet and nice.
Yeah,
And then to ignore the past. Because
yeah, I don't necessarily blame the churches. I blame the people themselves, but the lack thereof. You
yeah,
are correct.
I know. I do too. I do too.
I mean,
I do too. But
the lack of a moral fiber definitely leads to complete societal decay, and I think we're seeing the future now.
Have you read the Grand Inquisitor chapter of Karamazov Brothers by Dostoevsky?
Oh, no, actually, I don't think.
For the Grand Inquisitor. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Okay, read it. It's a chapter, and one of the brothers is just telling this story, and he's sort of a nihilist. So he's telling this story. One brother wants to go into the priesthood. One brother's a nihilist. The other one is just like a hedonist, and the father is just this gross old drunk. So the scenario is the Inquisitor during the Inquisition. Jesus comes back, and everybody's excited about Jesus coming back. But the Inquisitor brings him and puts him up, locks him up, and he has this monologue because Jesus never says anything. So it's just the Inquisitor explaining why I have to kill you. You have to go. You're ruining everything. You're ruining everything. So it's just a long monologue. Yeah, I mean it's
yeah. And it does ring a bell now that you mention it. Yeah, it's kind of like I think after you mentioned that we talked about the screw tape letter, so that was another one that we mentioned at one point.
Yeah, so Dostoevsky was actually a religious man.
Yeah,
so he was not, but his writings are also nihilistic. They're also the Underground Man. So you want to start on him? You want to start on Dyer? We can.
Okay, yeah, let's get on him. Let's take a look at him. Let me full screen this and play this little clip.
There was like a global depression that's around the time of the Depression, if I recall. They realized they weren't going to be able to rebuild the British Empire, but they had already kind of been flirting with ideas of technocracy. A lot of the circles around Lord Milner had moved towards this idea of a world federalist socialist government that they could try to impose on the world. Lord Curtis wrote a book called Commonwealth of God, which would, according to Quigley, be the basis for the modern, quote, New World Order. And they decided that a better way to run this would be what they call the roundtable groups. And the roundtable groups are kind of like semi-public, semi-secret governing boards of wise men based on, obviously, the Arthurian idea. I don't think it literally goes back to like the Middle Ages, but just the idea of a board of wise men that would be the real power structure. Ironically, I think you could probably find this in Plato's, I think it's Laws, where Plato says, this is later Plato after the Republic. He comes up with this idea of a council of wise men rather than the philosopher king. So it's like, let's have a council of, Kissingers and Brzezinski's to run things rather than just one philosopher king. But he actually describes it as a kind of a secret society security state that functions. He calls it the Council of Night because they function on the basis of meeting in secret at night, and they get reconnaissance and intelligence. And so it's really a breakaway security state model. And I think that's what we exist under. It's not identical to the structure of Rhodes and Rothschild and Milner, but it's the same model because they set up this idea of steering committees and steering groups. And then you get Chatham House created in the UK, which is the sort of source of that, the fountainhead of that. They build in New York, Pratt House literally mirrored on that. And so the CFR and the Trilateral Commission are the US mirror to the UK version of that. So that, I believe, is the real source of, the Atlanticist power block, as Quigley calls it. That's who's.
Yeah, what about him? I just realized he has a lot of nervous tics. He has a lot of nervous tics. And
I did have it sped up.
I know you had it sped up. Yeah, I know that. But he does. If you listen to him a lot, he's always coughing. It's like Slavoj Žižek, the communist Slavoj Žižek. That's always get the nervous tics. I think maybe very free associative. Zizek is like that. He'll be talking about something and then it'll be connected to something else and connected to something else. And, of course, he's brilliant.
Yeah. But that's the
Very
model for
intelligent. And
conspiracy
he has
theories.
this.
I mean, if you
I
think about
wonder
it,
if there's
any
some
meme of conspiracy
schizoid-
theory, it's a guy with a bulletin board with
It's connections.
yawn everywhere. Yeah.
Right. The whole room is full of connections. I wonder if it has something to do with a schizonality disorder, not a serious one. Because when he's talking about when he's talking about Plato's Republic, I'm thinking, okay, I've read that several times. I've taught selections of Plato. Let's just stop and discuss the Republic carefully for the next 15 minutes. But he's like, Plato's Republic, oh, the Arthurian legend. And he's like, this reminds me of Rothschild. And maybe it's mania. I used to do that too when I was young. I don't know.
Well, the thing about it is, too, is there's so much information. And I kind of can relate to it because I used to think that way. Like, I would think very rapidly. And if you try to discuss it with somebody, you try to get so much information out to prove your previous points. And like, I don't know. And there's so much stuff that you have to try to paint a picture within a few minutes.
Yeah,
and
no.
You're like, no, this and this and this and this.
I
So
know. Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you teach. That's why you teach like rhetoric. I've taught rhetoric. You teach students, this is how you organize your ideas. This is how you present them so that people can understand what you're talking about rather than just blurting it out.
But the thing about conspiracy theories,
a lot of people blurting stuff out.
Yeah, but there's volumes of stuff to go through with conspiracy theories. That's the thing. Like, there's so much stuff to go through, and you can't.
But you don't have to cover everything in 5 minutes. Pick out one thing.
Well, the way I like to look at conspiracy theories is this. Like, I look at it as there's an organization that people say, okay, this is a bad organization, and the best way that I know to look at that or study that is look at their actual mission statements. So if you go to the Council on Foreign Relations and you go to the Trilateral Commission's websites, you can look at their mission
what he
statements.
says. Yeah, look at the real statements.
They're spot on exactly. I mean, they're saying, we would like a one world government under us, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I if you look at the World Economic Forum, any of these, if you look at it and read it, it's like they're not hiding anything.
One thing
it's just that the mainstream news hides it. Mainstream news wants to hide it because that's where people get their information. I remember there was a survey a few years ago, and where do you get your information? And some huge number, like 70%, said social media or Facebook. Meaning all they read are the headlines on Facebook to determine their worldview.
And that's about as deep as they go, too. Just a headline. They never actually read the articles. Most of them just are headline people. Like, it's crazy.
Oh, and then they'll respond to it. I know I started just posting headlines on Facebook a long time. Nobody uses it anymore, but back in the day, it was interesting.
Yeah.
And everybody you'll post a headline that's very misleading and very vague, and you have so many people respond angrily. What kind of a person are you? Blah, blah, blah. And you're
right.
There's not even a goal.
Just a picture of a headline. But that's what, I don't know. It's amazing, like, the spin they put on things. But, like, to me, do you agree with his statement on that clip when he's saying he thinks it's under a small group of people? He mentioned the Rothschilds, Rockefellers. Do you believe in the fact that there is a group of, let's say, 300 people that run an organization that sets policy in the United States, England, and all the
well, I know Plato's Republic, and I understand how it was set up with the different tiers of society and the philosopher king. And I don't remember the letters. I just don't remember them. But the idea, of course, is that you have a philosopher king for the purpose of society because the democracy is not going to work. Plato came from a super rich family, like a billionaire family. So he mostly was writing for Socrates as a mouthpiece because he was a student of Socrates, and Socrates didn't write. But later, when he settles down and it's like, oh, I'm the son of a billionaire. So, of course, he changes his worldview a little bit. It's much more aristocratic. And the king has gone throughout history. But, of course, there's never really a good philosopher king.
But
now, what he's saying about the body of well, in that case, I guess the philosopher king would appear to be the perfect philosopher king would be a sort of puppet, that relied on an oligarchy surrounding him to really make decisions.
So do you?
Obama's a great philosopher king. Obama's great. Just think, everybody was like, wow, you're so brilliant and you're so good looking and you're so charismatic and you're so kind.
But do you specifically think that there is a group,
Mhm.
like you say, the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations? Do you think that that body, and maybe even now the World Economic Forum and the Bilderbergs and all these things, do you think those people actually control the world, or do you think that all of
I think,
that, because that by
you know,
definition
I
is
don't know.
conspiracy theory?
Yeah, it's probably a loose cabal. I mean, there's not one group of evil people sitting there with the horns, but it's a loose cabal of people making big decisions, and they're more or less on the same page, but I'm sure they argue. I mean, put Hillary Clinton and somebody in the same room, they're going to argue about what to do, but they would be more or less on the same page. They know that there are problems. Now, once you get into these things like, is climate change being caused by man? I don't mean by petroleum products. I mean, is some cabal actually changing the weather so that they can force us into accepting technology? You see what I'm saying? That's when it's like, I don't know about that. I don't even know. To believe that we have the technology to alter the weather system of the planet, which is the most complex system we know of.
Well, ironically,
maybe, but at
it's
that
ironic
point,
you say that, because I read an article yesterday talking about that very thing. That they do it in Dubai all the time. They see clouds. They have
seeding clouds.
well, there's high frequency radar
Yes,
arrays
I know.
that can electrify certain levels of the ionosphere, and they can do certain things, successfully.
Well,
so
that's
there is something like
that's been considered a possible solution to real climate change.
Mhm.
But the idea of actually controlling the planet's weather, this is like science fiction level.
Yeah.
This is
I
like,
don't think they control the entire weather scheme, but
no.
in that vein, so let's look at it this way. If you accept the fact that they have climate change and their solution is to tax you for it, make you pay for it, is that a solution to climate change?
I mean, I guess you have to ask, is it about taxes or is it about accepting new technology? Remember if we have climate change and it's natural, what powerful people tend to do is and that was just in Shogun. That was a good line from Shogun. I just watched that series. They don't radically alter things like magic. Like, I don't know that there was some secret society sitting around creating COVID. But when it happens, people in power think, how can we use this to our advantage? Things naturally happen. Climate change naturally happens. How can we use it to our advantage? Diseases leak out. How can we use it to our advantage? There's all kind of, can we use it to our advantage? Unless you think that we're all just puppets we're in a simulation and somebody's just moving us around like the Matrix. But in reality, powerful people know how to read they know how to see which way the wind is blowing and take advantage of it.
So let me ask you this question, and to put it in context even further. Let's see, when did Kamala Harris come into the nomination? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? So before 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I thought you meant the first time. She was the first one to announce her running years back. She was the first.
Oh, no. I mean on this election. So before let's say it's 3 weeks ago. Before 3 weeks ago, she was the least popular vice president.
Vice president ever. Just completely hidden. And when she came out, it was word salad.
Yeah, she got 0 votes on the previous thing. So she's never had a single vote for her to be a nominee ever. And so 3 weeks ago, she's the least popular one. And then, like magic, there's an announcement, a replacement of Joe Biden, and unified across the board. Every media outlet's talking about it. She's the hero of all mankind. Right. How does that happen?
Because there's coherence to the mainstream media, because they're owned by a handful of corporations. That's why they all have the same talking points.
So would that be considered a conspiracy?
These days, I don't even know if it's a conspiracy. I mean, you can just watch the media and see everybody has the same talking points. It's the same for mainstream Fox. I mean, they'll get on there and I'll hear the same thing coming out of the mouths of different people over the next few days. You know, it's
I'm trying to get you to admit you're a conspiracy theorist.
oh well, I
point.
mean, some people would say the biggest conspiracy theory in history is Christianity.
Why was
That
why
the
would that be?
idea, well, the idea that ultimately everything seems to be like nature and maybe natural spirits and paganism, and we have our life here. But behind it all is a completely powerful, unknowable, not just unseen, but ultimately unknowable God who controls everything. Because, you know, Allah is in the same, you know, on the same page, but that's just an imitation of Christian God anyway. I guess you could go back to the Jews and say they're the ones who thought there's not just multiple gods and they're not just tribal gods. By the end of like around the year 500 BC, the Jews had decided that the writings indicate there's just one God. For a while, it was just we have our tribal God. And then they realized, oh, there's just one God. There's never been, there have been vague notions of monotheism, but it's usually some type of like Atman in Hinduism, that's like just a universal force. It's usually not, there's a person that we ascribe to that is outside of all things knowable, that transcends all that is possibly knowable, that controls everything. I mean, that's kind of crazy. And then to say, oh, they came down like a human being, like they're so completely out of space-time that they don't even exist as far as our limited human mind is concerned. But somehow they came down in the form of a person and got crucified. Like the whole purpose was to commit suicide.
So do you think that that was conspiratorial in its origin of that story? In other words, was he a
No, I
self-fulfilling
think,
prophecy? Like did he know the story and say, and he did the steps to make the story kind of come true, so to speak? Is that what you're trying
well,
to say?
I didn't want to get in theology. I'm just saying it's kind of a joke.
Yeah.
It's sort of a joke. I've heard this before, that Christianity is the biggest conspiracy theory of all time. I mean, it's obviously people who are not Christian who say it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. But I mean, to me, whenever I hear someone say that they don't believe there's any conspiratorial aspect to history, I think they're fools, because it's very obvious that there is power elites that do control things and control
It's
the amount of
Machiavellian.
it's very Machiavellian.
Machiavelli, he
And-
was explaining exactly how you get power and hold on to power, and that's what they do.
Yeah, 100%. So people that deny that to me are crazy. Like when I almost wear it as a badge of honor when somebody's like, "Oh man, you're just being a conspiracy theorist." I'm like, "Hell yeah, I am," because that's the way it is. And like literally, I'm running out of conspiracy theories that haven't come true. Like I've
That
got to
haven't come
find more.
true.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean,
I know.
like,
I
even going
posted
back
on
to
my Facebook. It's a joke. I posted on. I said, "What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and fact?"
time.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months. I put it on my Facebook.
It's crazy, man. Like people still fight that and think that's like an insult when they say that about me, because I'll start talking politics. I mean, you know me. I meet somebody from California or something, and they're spouting off, but they think that should change and this and that. And I'm like, well, no, this because of this and that. And they're like, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. Yes, you're right. I am a conspiracy theorist because I see these things all the time, and
I think it's a
not
boomer
by
thing.
accident. It's not by accident. I'm not a boomer though. I'm a Gen Xer, man.
I know. I'm not a boomer either. So I consider the boomers, the one who were born like the 40s, that they grew up that you can trust the news. And so they tend to watch, they have their favorite news. They watch CNN or MSNBC, and they think, I can trust these people. And those people tell them that all of this is a conspiracy theory. And that's what happening is Joe Biden was one of the greatest presidents of all time. Unfortunately, he just got weak. Kamala Harris was up there, and now we realize what a great candidate she is. And they think, yeah, that's right. I believe that.
You want to keep the momentum that Joe had going, let's vote for Kamala. She's the one. But like, I'm thinking people, if they can't remember 3.5 years ago when everything was much better than it is now.
Everything goes down the
They-
memory
they for-
hole.
they forget all that. It's unbelievable to me how that affects people. Like
What happened to
thought-
all the Palestinian protests? What happened to all the Gaza protests? That's
nobody
over with.
knows. It's all a mystery now, and it's all just kind of gone. But it blows
It's all-
me
I
away
knew
that
it'd be
people
gone.
don't remember it. Like I remember reading 1984 by George Orwell and thinking
Yeah,
he was like talking about. I think we were at war with them 2 years ago, and now they're our ally. And then it was all
right.
opposite.
And everybody
Nobody will remember.
forgets
Yeah, and I'm like, going, how can they do that? That's impossible. That's ridiculous. And sure enough,
because everybody's
I
just
see
sitting
it
there staring at
every
a screen,
I see it
getting an
every day now.
emotional response.
It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
They show a
It's
picture
unbelievable.
of Trump, boo, 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 boo,
Right.
you know, and it's like,
Right.
um,
I never thought I'd
And
live
then
to see the day where 1984 was literally like reading a history book. Now it's unbelievably accurate. If you
yeah,
haven't
well,
read
the goal
1984,
is
go
not,
read
not-
it.
yeah, I've read it. Yeah. The goal is not 1984. The goal is Brave New World.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, when we live in a completely hedonistic, drug doped up state, and we're just, I don't know what the purpose of us are. In the Matrix, we were somehow generating. I never got that. We're somehow generating energy. I always assumed that our brains. I used to say this all the time. At Tasty Taste, I used to say, I don't understand why I'm paying for everything on the internet. It's using my brain. In other words, it's sucking my brain for free. So why am I having to pay for it? It should
That's
all
right.
be free because it doesn't
They make it
exist
cheap.
without controlling our mind.
Yeah, 100%.
If you
100%.
destroyed every human brain in the world, the internet would not be useful.
No, it wouldn't. It stopped existing because we have to keep it running too.
Right.
So,
So it needs to be doing all this stuff for free.
yeah. Well, that's why they
It's
make
kind of
it
a
cheap.
joke. But
No, it's very true though. It's like it's a joke, but it's extremely true because like everything, and you'll notice too, things that are tend to be bad for you become cheaper, like McDonald's. They could have the world on fire. McDonald's got a burger for $1. You
yeah,
could have like the
yeah.
worst inflation in the history of mankind.
Like
and
porn is
McDonald's-
free. Porn is
Right,
free.
right. All the things that are horrible for you are just easily accessible and free. So if you don't have money,
Mhm.
you still have access to that. Woohoo! But I don't know. I think that's by design too, man. I think inflation sucks the wealth up to the elites, and then it makes it harder for anybody to afford anything of substance, books, whatever, to consume. And then there's no conversations anymore. That's why I enjoy our conversations, buddy, because like there's not many people that have these conversations or care about them, and they should, because it's literally their entire world. Like the things you and I talk about are important. I know that very little comes of it, but the fact that somebody recognizes these issues and can discuss these things is a huge deal. Like, and I think,
But even discussing it labels you as far right. Even discussing
yeah,
it.
oh yeah, discussing anything. But if I don't have just a box to throw you in and label you as you're this, you're that, you're this, that's as far as
You're labeled as far right.
The left goes. The left puts everything in a little neat box that has no thought to it, and you just are. You're a bigot, or you're a homophobe, or you're this, and then end of conversation. And there's no defense, and that's not not living free at all, for sure.
No, yeah, the final goal is for us to an augmented reality. I didn't say virtual. I said we'll still be in reality, but we'll be augmented. I mean, there have been science fiction movies on this where, like, remember the first time I saw it in a movie was, what was the Tom Cruise movie where they can predict the future?
A Minority Report.
Minority Report, first time. Remember the first time you saw that and they were using the screens with their hands and you're like, wow, that's a great special effect. Well, that's what we're going toward. And it's been tried before a few years ago with Google. Remember Google Glasses? That was a big flop. I actually had some of those.
There was something that I thought was interesting. And I know you're not a big Marvel movie fan, but I think it was in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and they had captured one of these guys that was like a plant, brought him to a roof, and he's spilling his guts, and he's like, because they were making these ships that would fly and hover, and then they could take out 1 million targets a minute with these guns that were pre-programmed. And he's like, well, how do you know who to take out? He goes, how can we not know? He goes, we know your voting records, your bank statements, we know your social media, we know everything about you. We can label you, and we know exactly with 100% accuracy what you're going to do in the future based upon these previous things, which I thought was, I'm like, wow, they said the deep dark secret out in the open. I was impressed that they did that. But it's
Yeah,
true.
but by saying that, you see, by saying that, they negate it.
Oh yeah,
By saying we live in a simulation, then you think, oh, that's funny, it's a movie, and you stop believing it's real. Like
yeah.
one of my favorite philosophers, Jean Baudrillard, who was the whole idea behind the simulation. That's where the ideas for the Matrix came. Said the reason prisons exist, they're important to exist, big prisons, to convince us that we're not in a prison.
Right.
Disney World exists in order to convince us that we're not already living in Disney World. He's the one that has these ideas of simulation, simulacra. He's like one of my main. I read him for like 2 decades. He's like one of my main. It was so bad. I'm not even a crying guy. And when I heard he died on the radio, I was driving my red Jeep. I had to stop because I was crying because he died.
Maybe we'll do a whole episode dedicated to that subject. I think that'd be kind of interesting, actually.
I mean, I could, yeah. It's all about the simulation that we live in now. I mean, he was totally right. He's writing in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, that's actually a long time ago. I mean, I know Isaac Asimov, and a few other people like that, brought up the subject. Usually it was dealing with androids and dream states and whatnot, but yeah, I've always found that fascinating subject. Fascinating. I mean, science fiction from the past isn't today's science fact, so maybe that's something that'll.
Yeah, well, that's what I told you. That's what I told you today. I said we're in science fiction now. I said that would have been a good name.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. 100%, man. We're coming up to our time limit, buddy. I love our discussions, dude. We're 37 minutes right now, so yeah. What do you want to leave? What do you want to leave the people with out there about conspiracy theories? Let's wrap it up with that.
That they're dangerous to believe and dangerous to not believe.
So what do you do?
Buy more cat food.
So to me, conspiracy theories, like, I think I don't know if they're not dangerous to believe, as far as, in my opinion, but like I think you need to know about them, but I also think you need to use common sense and temperance to understand what they're talking about. Like, there's no unified conspiracy theory of everything.
Correct.
And I think they kind of pull from a lot of facts, and then there's holes in it, and it's usually not how you think it is. It's not like the typical plot of Dr. Evil sitting in a room, doing this and saying, oh yes, next step will be this. Like, they haven't figured that out yet. But I think they're getting pretty efficient at taking advantage of, like you said, taking advantage of situations and exploiting them to no end. And that in itself is a conspiracy too. So, man, I appreciate you so much, Zane, man.
All right. Good talk.
Good talk. We'll do it again in a week, and we'll have more clips and stuff for you guys. But until next time, boys and girls, make sure you subscribe and like the video so we can get far and wide and get this thing rolling. And I hope you guys have a great week.
Ciao.